Right, getting straight into it. This is one of them subjects that I could talk about all night. A lot of people do realise the potential of it and the ramifications of it. Some people don't want to even contemplate it. And it's probably one of them situations where you might think the passage of time will iron out all the creases. More evidence will come out over the years, like many other scenarios. What am I talking about? I'm talking about 9/11. Now, just mentioning that gets you a certain connotation. Tin foil, this, that, and the other. Certain people don't want to accept the fact for very many different reasons. A lot of it I can respect, some of it just downright stupid. But I respect people's opinions per se if they've looked and they've critically analysed. For me, 9/11 was a big deal, and it still is a big deal. There's still many questions, but it's one of them subjects that your average person does not want to contemplate. Now, like I say, there's many reasons why possibly that is. I know one of them will be people don't want to consider the possibility that governments could actively work against you in such a industrial scale. Now, I can understand that when you're blue-pilled and you're living your life. It's quite a paranoid thought to think that the governments of the world can conspire, that's a funny word, to do nefarious things to their citizens, to the populations of the said countries. No one wants to think that, although we all know, anyone watching this knows the reason why you're watching this is because you know something's fucked up in this world. So it takes you along them lines, whether you like it or not, if you've got questions. When you do start to look at questions, maybe more questions are presented to you. So as you go down that rabbit hole, you then inevitably realise there's much more to a lot of things that you look into than what was first presented by your mainstream medias and all this. So I can understand why people don't want to go near it. You know, it's one of them subjects. How could a government take out 3,000 people and then use that as a pretext to go to war, which would then go on to take out millions of other people and destabilise all kinds of countries in the Middle East and cause all kinds of shit that would come back on your doorstep. People would prefer to think that it's probably a bit more organic. Now, that's fine if you want to think that. Personally, I've looked into a few different issues over the years, and to me, the one thing I've learned is pretty much no war is organic. I mean, the First and Second World War were orchestrated. The Second World War was financed by Western countries. Western monarchs, particularly the English monarchy, were Nazi sympathisers, and it's documented. There's a lot of documentary footage and documentation to prove that. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. We can't be fighting Nazis, but then we're Nazi sympathisers. So then it leads you to, well, what is the real, you know? And then it opens the doors. Jimmy Savile, back in the day, in the 70s, if people would have come out and said Jimmy Savile, when he was in his height of fame, he's a paedophile and he's a procurer for the elite, you wouldn't believe it. When he was doing Jim Will Fix It and he's doing all his noble work, you wouldn't believe it. It's a conspiracy. The Gulf of Tonkin conspiracy. Ted Heath. He's a man, when he was in power in the 70s, you would not have said this guy was a paedophile. This guy was linked to maybe satanistic, ritualistic type of murders to children. That's the allegation put against him. Certainly, there was an operation called Operation Conifer, which was held later on after his death. And it was found that if he was still alive, they would question him because there's many questions. So it seems that over a period of time, events iron themselves out. Adolf Hitler, I'm sure if you was to go into any primary school or any secondary school for that matter, they would probably teach your children that Adolf Hitler died in a bunker, him and Eva Braun. with a suicide pill. Well, it was only last year leaked files come out from the CIA where they openly admitted Adolf Hitler probably fled to Argentina. So it's up to you whether you want to actually go there or not as an individual. You know, I'd rather believe all the narratives that they tell me, but we know time and time again these motherfuckers lie. They lie out their face. JFK. My eldest daughter come to me probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. She was doing a piece on JFK in her secondary school, and she could not draw her own conclusions. The only answer was Lee Harvey Oswald, the only shooter who assassinated JFK. Same again. Through leaks, we now know, ballistic reports to say that there was bullets that entered through the front as well. Now, there's always been theories about the Grass Knoll and other gunmen, but they were conspiracy theories. The actual term, apparently conspiracy theory, is derived from the JFK case, because they had to figure out a way to curtail people, shut them down, hence bringing out that term conspiracy theory. So where I'm going with all this is Operation Northwoods. Now, before you even go into 911 or even want to contemplate it, if you're coming from the premise of, oh, well, governments can't do that, look at human democide, for one, tap that in. Secondly, look at Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods was a proposed false flag operation against Cuban government that originated with the US Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States government in 1962. Now, bear that date in mind, 1962, that year. The proposals call for the Central Intelligence Agency and others US government operatives to commit acts of terrorism, against American civilians, so that's against their own people, and military targets, blaming it on the Cuban government, okay? So that's an open false flag to draw the public into wanting retaliation against the Cubans. The plans detailed in a document included the possible assassination of Cuban emirs, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes, blowing up a US ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in US cities. So this is on their own people, in order to get the public opinion to really want to go in to Cuba. Because don't forget, this was a Cold War. Cuba was in alignment with Russia, and Cuba's obviously very near to American soil. So these are the devious little plans. The interest within American deep state was born then, to the point where they superseded what's good for the people. They just wanted their own agenda, fulfilling an agenda. At the time of the proposal, communists led by Fidel Castro had recently taken power in Cuba. The operation proposed creating public support of a war against Cuba, blaming it on terrorist acts that would actually be perpetrated by US government. Do you hear that? To this end, Operation Northwood proposals recommended hijackings and bombings, followed by introduction of phony evidence that would implicate the Cuban government, it stated. The desired result from the execution of this plan would be to take place the United States in the apparent position of suffering defensible grievances from a rash and irresponsible government of Cuba, and to develop an international image of a Cuban threat to peace in the West. So that's what we call fake news. That's what we call demonizing. But that's demonizing a country to your own people through the way of fake news, in order to gain opinion to go to war against them. Does it sound familiar? Several proposals were included with Operation Northwoods, including real or simulated actions against various US military and civilian targets. The operation recommended developing a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area. The plan was drafted by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so this is not the president, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, part of the US government's anti-communist Cuban project. Operation Northwoods was never officially accepted. It was authorised by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but then rejected by who? John F. Kennedy. According to current release documentation, none of the operations became active under auspices of the Operation Northwood proposals. Now, to me, that tells me a couple of things. The emergence of the deep state, because someone was superseding JFK there. JFK's clocked it and said, I ain't doing that. So this plan was purposely done behind his back. So we're not even saying presidents have to be involved, but when it comes to 9/11, I tend to differ with that one. But this can actually happen above the president. A war can be kind of drawn without the president probably knowing the true facts behind it. Now, this was in 1962. November of 1963, we all know what happened to JFK. Now, I'm not saying it was because of this. It could have been for very many reasons. There's been a lot of speculation as to what it was over. But it was obvious that even from Eisenhower, when Eisenhower left office, he made that famous speech talking about the emergence of the deep state, as it were. Now JFK's took over. He's realising. He's done speeches on secret societies within the government. Oh, and guess what happened to him? So, to me, it makes me think, to the normal layman, it is very far-fetched to think 3,000 people and the governments knew about it. No, it only takes a triangle of people to know about it, certain people in certain places. As we know, we can see from that. That could have happened without the president actually knowing about it. Agitations could have been done. Black projects could have been done. It's happened all the time. Ronald Reagan was involved in doing black projects with the Iran-Contras. So, you look into these things. You consider that, you think to yourself, well, the likelihood, 9/11, it could be very likely. If you look at what the agenda may have been before they drawn up that plan, you then fast forward to the PNAC report, a white paper detailing the defences of the new American century and how they propose to do it. So there's nothing organic about that white paper. That is an agenda. And one of the agendas was to create a new Pearl Harbor. Now, we all know what happened with Pearl Harbor. We know the level of distaste it gave to the public, how it changed public opinion. So I'm not saying believe 9/11. You've got to believe what I've just presented to you, because everything I've just presented to you is actual fact. So all I am stating is that for me, it makes the likelihood that governments can work in this way against the civilians, populations of the world. We're talking many countries here. We're not just talking America. Then I would say, looking at Operation Northwoods for so many different reasons, I would say it is bang on that it is likely these guys do this. You're talking about defense contracts. You're talking about gaining precious minerals from other countries. You're talking about establishing banking systems within them countries. Move in the cabal, our cabal. Hashtag just saying. So it's up to you guys. Do you want to be 30, 40 years from now, when so much evidence comes out about 9/11, that you will think to yourself, why didn't I contemplate that it was a possibility at the time? Why did I just laugh at my friends when they told me of what they've learned? Why have I gone against over nearly 2,000 architects that are levying and lobbying against the official narrative of 9/11? It goes against physics, goes against common sense. Who done it, why it was done, it's another matter. I'm going to leave you with this. This is a financial expert called Jim Rickards. This man has written a book called The Death of Money. He speaks about put options, insider trading that was done in the World Trade Center up until the bombs hit. Entities knew of the event 9/11 coming. because the insider trading that's taken place all the way up to the actual planes hitting proves that. This is a financial expert. Check him out. I love you all, even the pissing haters.
Hi, Max Kaiser here. Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. Time now to go to New York City and speak with Jim Rickards, author of this new book. It's called The Death of Money. Remember, Jim did the Currency Wars book, which became an instantaneous global sensation and bestseller. Now he's got the new one, The Death of Money. Jim Rickards, welcome back to the Kaiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, let me read you a quote from your book. Quote, "It was the most blatant case of insider trading I have ever seen." This is a quote from the first chapter of your book. Tell us about it.
Well, the insider trading referred to in Chapter 1 of The Death of Money, Max, has to do with shorting airline stocks in advance of 9/11. So there was insider trading ahead of the 9/11 attack. It was very blatant, very clear. It was not picked up at the time. It was by some people in the market, I should say, but not by the intelligence authorities or any national security officials, but it was seen in the market.
All right, you mentioned this CIA headquarters and the fact that there was talk about insider trading ahead of 9/11 in the days leading up to the events of 9/11, particularly 4 days leading up to 9/11, looking at the forensic evidence and looking at markets as a way to aggregate lots and lots of data. And you talk about this in your book, the way that your team presents to the CIA a way of what you call market intelligence, or MarkEnt, which is to use this very sensitive options market as a way to give a telltale sign of activity that's happening around the world and whether potentially this would flag a terrorist attack. So in the days leading up to the 9/11, in the options market, in those airline options, you have concluded without any equivocation that there was insider trading on those options leading up to the event, correct?
Well, that's my conclusion, Max, but it's not just my conclusion. As I mentioned, there are 3 major academic studies as well as other anecdotal evidence all pointing in the same direction. So to me, it's an open and shut case. It's all described in the book, which is heavily footnoted, I should say. So it's not just sort of wild speculation. I think it's very well documented. We take a look at the 9/11 Commission report, which reached a different conclusion, but I sort of deconstruct their famous footnote where they describe why they reached the conclusion and show what the flaws are in the footnote, what the flaws are in the forensic technique that the 9/11 Commission used. But your larger point that markets give us price signals, we know that, but how to look behind the price signal and understand exactly what's going on. By the way, this technique, which we explored for the CIA, is a completely normal technique used by hedge funds every day. Now, hedge funds are looking for insider trading around M&A deals. They're looking for a leak. You know, we see this all the time. A stock suddenly soars for no reason. There's no news. Maybe the market's flattened down, but a particular stock goes way up, and everyone said, gee, what's happening with that stock? And then 3 days later, we find out that it's the subject of a takeover that's announced, but clearly the takeovers don't come out of the thin air. They're, lawyers and accountants and experts and managers work on these things for weeks and sometimes months, and that's the inside group. But sometimes the information leaks out, people trade on it, and you see the price action ahead of the announcement. That's exactly what we saw in 9/11. There was massive, massive buying of put options, and of course when you buy a put option, that's a bet that the stock is going to go down. Massive buying of put options on American Airlines and United Airlines in the last several trading days ahead of 9/11. And again, that's been studied extensively, so I don't think there's any question that it was insider trading. I should add, however, that this was insider trading by terrorist associates. I want to be rigorous and scientific about the evidence, but sort of separate this from some of the crazy theories. There are crazy theories out there that, somehow the U.S. government was behind 9/11. That's all nonsense. And again, I want to separate myself from that. But the basic idea that the terrorists and their associates, that network, were engaged, who did know about the attack, were engaged in insider trading ahead of 9/11. That's very clear.
All right. Of course, when you trade options, you have to do it through a broker. We know from the investigative journalism of Lars Scholl, we know from statements from Deutsche Bank here in Europe, that these trades were done at Alex Brown, which is a firm not too far from the CIA, who was run by Buzzy Krongard. When I was working at Alex Brown, he was leading up the firm. He then took a job as the deputy director of the CIA under George Tenet during the events of 9/11. So here you have a firm in Baltimore where the trades were done that was run by the guy who's now the deputy director at the CIA. Your thoughts, your comments?
Well, Buzzy Krongard, former Alex Brown executive, was executive director of the CIA at the time. I haven't looked at all at the Alex Brown trading. To me, it's sort of irrelevant. What I look at is the market as a whole. What we were seeing was really coming through the specialists. Now, you're exactly right, Max. I make the point in the book, nobody trades alone. If you're trading with somebody. So what I really focused on is the overall market action, not any particular firm, but could you tell from the price action and the volume and the momentum itself that something was going on at the time? And of course, we reached the conclusion that something was going on, which was obviously this 9/11 attack was about to happen. But I focused a lot on what's called signal amplification. And just to explain that for the viewers, you could have a very small terrorist trade, meaning, a few thousand shares. Well, someone sees that. It doesn't make the person who sees it a terrorist. They're just a specialist or a hedge fund or someone is kind of watching the tape, and they say, you know what, there's no reason for the stock to be going down. There's no reason for anyone to be buying puts. Someone knows something I don't, and they'll buy more puts. That then puts more pressure on the stock. There's more put buying. So by the end of the day, you may have millions of shares that have traded. It doesn't mean all those people are terrorists or insiders. That's actually legitimate trading. If you're watching the tape and you do what I call a piggyback trade on the original trade, that's actually not illegal. And all those people are not terrorists. Only the original trade, my example, a couple thousand shares would have been the terror trade. The rest of it is piggybacking or signal amplification. But this is where the 9/11 Commission fell down, because when they went back to investigate after the fact, they looked at the big guys. The big guys are invariably not the insider traders. They're not the terrorists. They're the guys piggybacking. You got to go all the way down to that small initial trade to find it, and that's what we did on a multi-year strategic study for the CIA. We basically explained how you could use that forensic technique, that market information, possibly to detect the next spectacular terrorist
Right, you talk
attack.
about signal amplification. When I was talking to Cantor Fitzgerald brokers and bankers in the days leading up to 9/11, they themselves were buying these airline puts. They told me, based on rumors that were coming out of Alex Brown associated with Buzzy Krongard. So this looks to me as if CIA insiders knew enough about what was going on, but chose to make money rather than blowing the whistle.
You could have a lot of put buying. In fact, there was a lot of put buying. That's clearly documented. I mean, we have the price information, we have the volume information, so we know what was actually transacted, and that's been studied very extensively. But the point I'm making is a lot of that put buying could have been people saying, hey, something's going on. We don't know what it is. Why is everyone buying these puts? We're going to buy some more. We're going to make the same bet. We don't know why. You don't have to know why. All you have to know is that somebody knows something you don't. So the point I'm making is that a very small terrorist trade could have been amplified into a much larger market trade involving quite a few Wall Street firms. Again, I haven't looked at Cantor Fitzgerald or Alex Brown in particular. I've looked at the market as a whole. But the idea that a lot of people were buying puts based on the original signal,
Right,
that makes perfect sense.
and presumably somebody who was trading on their own demise was unable to collect the profits because some money was left over at Alex Brown and never collected, presumably from a banker who chose to take the money instead of running away and escaping with their lives.